Hello everyone, it is that time of the week again where Politics Joe has put out another Extreme Britain Vox Pop, and at this point I don't really get the point in it. All it seems to do is get people out here in Britain saying that they quite like the status quo, apart from the first one, which is all about immigration. So this time they have gone to the smartest place in the UK to ask if university is worth it, and I have no doubt that most people would just say yes, mainly for the social side. That's my general prediction for today's video, so let's just get into it, see what they say.
Degrees from universities like Oxford do is give you sort of that rubber stamp approval on your CV to tell corporations that you are like one of them.
Kind of true. It has sort of become the interview process, especially for graduate schemes, for companies to know that you've gone through 3 years of being able to hand in your work on time, therefore you'll probably be okay here. I mean, me as an example, I studied geology at university and I've ended up going into software development. They're not exactly related subjects, but it was thanks to a graduate scheme that I actually managed to get into software development, though again, to be fair, that is because I did a year's work experience in software development learning to code, and interviewers seem a lot more interested in that than how I spent my time licking rocks at university. Also, yes, hashtag rock gang Jesus fried Christ.
We actually need more people with vocational skills. People who are doing medicine here, they're going to make like £12 an hour. Plumbers, they make so much money because we don't have enough plumbers.
Well, that's only true in the case of junior doctors. Once you start getting up to speciality doctors or become a specialist, you'll easily be earning over £100,000 a year. When it comes to plumbers and engineers and electricians and things like that, when you're working as an apprentice or doing on-the-job training, yes, you'll probably be earning probably about as much, if not slightly more, than a junior doctor, but the pay doesn't increase an awful lot more than that, like it does with medicine. The thing with studying medicine is that you are expecting to out-earn pretty much everyone in the UK by the time you are 35. Before that, yes, you're taking quite a bit of sacrifice because you are learning medicine at the expense of the British taxpayer.
Given my degree, even if I went into a job, I don't think I would be able to pay it off quickly enough.
I mean, based on this guy's accent, he is a foreign student, and trust me, I'm going to be making a rather informative video on foreign students later in the week because the Times have just made a massive expose on how effectively universities are encouraging foreign students to come by letting them get in with grades that are essentially fails in the UK, because students from abroad end up making universities a lot more money thanks to grants and foreign student loans and things like that. But I'll save that for them, but my point being is that this guy is a foreign student, so I can't really comment on his student loans from there, but student loans in the UK have to be the most student-sided loan that I've ever seen, to the point I think if you complain about it, you are an idiot.
So,
every year, around 23,000 people apply to study at the University of Oxford.
Yes, I'm not surprised. To a lot of people, Oxford is the peak of the UK's educational institutions.
And it's no wonder. For centuries, Oxford has been the finishing school for the upper echelon of British society.
Yes, and it earned that reputation perfectly validly. And it's not shocking because they have a high standard of entry, and in the past, they have made plenty of scientific discoveries and furthered academia quite drastically. It just seems in more recent times, if you watch the average Oxford Union debate, you'll start to see that your average person who goes to Oxford doesn't appear to be that bright. Well, the real reason for that, I think, is Oxford is very good at educating people in how to defend their own position without actually getting people to think if their own position is actually right or wrong. Which isn't exactly teaching critical thinking, that's more teaching sophistry. Hence, as I say, look at any Oxford Union debate, and you will frankly get pretty poor arguments. I think my number one example of this would have to be Alex O'Connor, or Cosmic Skeptic as he goes by on YouTube, as effectively the best way you can argue is the same way that New Atheists argued 30 years ago and has developed absolutely no argumentation since then. Hence he's ended up on about the same debate level as Ben Shapiro. I mean, just take a quick look at one of his YouTube shorts.
If we're sort of into philosophy, we like to think we've considered why there's something rather than nothing. That's in a sense the foundational philosophical question, but like really reflecting on the fact that there's no rule of the universe that we can discover that necessitates that any of this was here.
I'm not going to lie to you, I go through cycles of liking philosophy and hating philosophy, And it's videos like this that make me start hating philosophy. Because I do mean it when Alex O'Connor is a new atheist type, and any time I see him even try and address this question, anything that is remotely religious, he will just outright say, no, I refuse to even entertain that. Because of the most basic fallacies when it comes to debating that sort of thing. But when philosophy graduates start talking about things like this, I just switch off. It's not interesting to me. Because you have a wealth of religions and spirituality that you can look at, but you just refuse to acknowledge any of it, because effectively you like to think science has all the answers, but this is a side of philosophy that science can't even touch. I mean, just hear where he goes with this.
I think I heard you on one podcast talking about the idea that the universe could have just been full of green balls and nothing else. And that would be really weird. Like, is it any more weird that we find ourselves in a universe with sort of nuclear factories floating in the sky with little rocks going around them?
I hope you're seeing what I mean. He's not really saying anything. He's effectively saying, in a nutshell, we are beyond lucky that we even exist to contemplate the question of what is being, or what is life, or what is the universe. Which is part of the reason I absolutely love The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, because when the supercomputer is asked what is the meaning of the life, universe, and everything, the answer's 42. And then, spoilers at the end of it, it turns out that effectively what the ultimate question actually is, because that's what they had to ask, was what is 7 times 6? And I think what Douglas Adams was trying to say with that is that we get so muddled up with philosophical questions that most of them end up just being pointless. And instead of actually trying to improve our lives or put the resources to anything else that's particularly useful, we just ask these pointless questions. And this is how I see Alex O'Connor. I see him asking completely pointless questions and pointing out things that every human on the earth has thought about before and realises, oh, but that doesn't matter, because my religion or spirituality or whatever, and I myself am religious. But then all Alex O'Connor does with this sort of question is see people who try and answer it through those sort of means and just say, yeah, but science says things like that are impossible, which kind of misses the whole point of spirituality, but that's Alex O'Connor for you.
And on that little rock, you've got these kind of atoms that bump into each other in such a way as to produce first-person conscious experience. Any one of those things seems to be sort of entirely contingent, right? And there seems something particularly odd about how easily this universe seemingly could have existed without any first-person experiences at all.
Yes, and this is where theology was born out of. This is why people have a belief system and believe in a higher power, because, yes, why is there first-person consciousness in the universe? Probably there's a God. A lot of Christians would argue he revealed himself through Jesus and other prophets. And Alex O'Connor will effectively just say, yeah, but that's impossible because of new atheist arguments from 30 years ago that I'm surprised people are still taking seriously, but I think will fall on their face in a few years. But then can't actually come up with any other sort of argument for why first-person consciousness even exists. But anyway, this is the type of people that Oxford are creating in their philosophy department these days, and just, quite frankly, it's embarrassing.
Of the 57 Prime Ministers we've had in the UK, 30 went to Oxford.
Yep, and again, we used to have pretty good Prime Ministers, and in more recent times, the Prime Ministers that all went to Oxford to study PPE, they've come out and been not that great. Post-war, our best Prime Minister was Margaret Thatcher. And yes, indeed, she did go to Oxford, but she didn't study PPE. No, instead, she studied chemistry, which I think arguably is where Oxford and Cambridge are best. Because if you look into any of their teaching staff or lecturers or professors for, not to be too harsh on philosophy, but within philosophy and any other sort of humanities, a lot of the time you're probably going to find, for lack of a better term, woke professors. And as mentioned before, standards for getting into university have dropped, especially for foreign students. So as I say, it's not surprising to see that university graduates are becoming measurably dumber.
Just going here increases your average earnings by about 10 grand a year.
Again, I'm not particularly surprised. It's prestigious for a reason. And I wouldn't be surprised if a rather large reason for that is that a lot of people who do graduate from Oxford go into research and academic career paths that, quite frankly, are very protected in the United Kingdom.
It also consistently tops the UK university league tables, making it probably the best university in the country.
And probably the world, but again, it's producing people that are very, very good at over-intellectualising their own arguments, but very poor at most other life skills.
There are around 1.6 million full-time students in the UK, and the vast majority don't attend a uni as good as this one.
What a moronic thing to say. He's literally just said Oxford University is the best university in the UK. I mean, even if you add arguably to that sentence, then obviously the vast majority of people aren't going to go to the best university in the United Kingdom. I've come to find myself really hating the way Politics Joe introduces all of these vox pops, because the vast majority of them could literally just be a couple of sentences long, but they just bloat them out with completely useless and redundant statements like that.
They'll graduate into a saturated job market, saddled with debt, and maybe wondering if it was all worth it.
Again, I'll go into the student debt later, but it's absolutely ridiculous to complain about it from my perspective. I literally can't think of a more student-sided debt system.
And students here are very likely in the same boat. While it is true that an Oxford degree definitely opens more doors, they can't all be Prime Minister.
No, and I don't think anyone's claiming that they can be. But they're clearly not struggling, especially compared to other universities, because for graduates between the years of 2012 and 2017, 9.2% were either looking for work or unavailable for work 6 months after graduating Oxford, and the rest of them were either in work or in further study. That means 90% of people who leave Oxford with a degree are easily getting into the labour market via either in an actual job or via staying in academia to do further studying. So again, as I say, it's really annoying me, these introductions, because it's like, oh, there's a saturated labour market and they can't all be Prime Minister. Okay, sure, but 91% of Oxford graduates are doing pretty well for themselves 6 months after uni.
They'll have the same shit job market and debt as everyone else.
Alright, again, this is getting into a really weird introduction. This whole introduction has been, if you go to Oxford, you have an absolutely great start in life. You can get pretty much any job you want. A lot of Prime Ministers went to Oxford, and odds are you're going to be earning 10 grand more than all your peers. Oh, but also their life is going to be just as bad as yours. No, it isn't. Don't even try and give me that. All you're saying is that they're getting an awful lot more for their money than most other people going to university would get. Don't try and make it out like people who got to Oxford are hard done by. They put good work in and they're getting good outcomes because of that hard work.
At a time when there are clear alternatives to going to university, like an apprenticeship, or going straight into work, or even doing a pyramid scheme you learnt about from a guy who made a YouTube video called Why You Shouldn't Go to University, The Truth.
Obviously this is a joke, but I actually kind of agree that we shouldn't be saying to people don't go to university, because I think it entirely depends on where you are in life. If you are very academic and you are interested in either going into academia or getting a job that will require qualifications, absolutely go to university. There's no reason not to. If you're based anyway as you're going into uni, you're probably not going to come out cringe. I went in somewhat cringe, came out pretty based. Just do your work and get good grades. But if you're the type of person that isn't particularly academic, I don't see the reason you should go to university. Do find an apprenticeship course, because to be honest, most apprenticeship courses, especially say if you're going to the police, you end up doing an apprenticeship course that ends up with a qualification that's equivalent to a degree anyway, plus you're being paid for it. So do find your alternative. Don't invest in Bitcoin unless you've got more money than sense. But honestly, I can see the whole Ponzi scheme of universities just crashing down around itself after I will go into more detail on the video later in the week, due to the scandal of foreign students and universities just being cash cows.
What's the most Oxford thing you've ever seen?
On my first day, we all went to have a, because I'm a fresher, so I've only been here a few months. We all went to have drinks in this room of the year above, and there were these guys, and literally they were all just so posh, and they all shook each other's hands, and I was the only girl in there, and no one said anything to me.
You see, Oxford's still pretty based. But seriously, when it comes to the Bullingdon Boys Club and things like that, they're just a meme really at this point. They don't hold any actual power or sway. And that's really been true since the 80s, because although Margaret Thatcher obviously wasn't part of a Bullingdon Boys Club, she was snubbed for an honorary degree for becoming Prime Minister from Oxford University, because it was full of lefty academics that absolutely hated her policies, despite the fact it saved the country. And a similar thing's been true of people like Boris Johnson, others from the Bullingdon Boys Club. The only reason they're still about, really, is because it's a club for rich boys, but they don't hold the power or sway that they used to, because Britain hasn't been a country that based its elites off wealth for quite some time now. Instead, it's social status and how right on you are, and this girl saying these sorts of things like nobody taught to me, it's probably not true. Or the most charitable thing I can say is that she's probably being hyperbolic. But even then, trying to say, oh, it's embarrassing that these boys were speaking with good diction, shaking hands, the standards for Oxford have just gone down. What else is there to say?
There's illustrious alumni from Oxford across all walks of life throughout history. Was that a factor in you wanting to come?
I mean, considering the quality of our politicians that have come out of this university, not really.
To an extent, I certainly agree, but I would also like to point out that politicians that don't come from Oxford tend to actually be worse than the people who went to Oxford. So as much as I don't like the pipeline from PPE Oxford graduates to Prime Minister, from what I can tell they do tend to fare better than those that didn't go there. However, as I say, the best Prime Minister we had from Oxford post-war did chemistry at Oxford, so maybe we just need to look more at the sciences for good competition there.
Really, what was it you study?
PPE.
Oh my god, she's going to be a Labour politician in a few years, I guarantee it. Or maybe even a wet Tory politician, I don't know. But that explains her story before of why she was the only woman. Women barely do PPE at Oxford.
What made you want to go into PPE?
I wanted to do something broad. I didn't want to just like hem into one subject. Then I discovered the reputation of it and I was like, it's too late now.
Who goes to university without researching what they're doing? I remember being at school and doing my UCAS, and one thing the teachers made sure we did was actually know what we're getting in for, because you kind of need to know what you're getting in for to write your personal statement. So I don't know how you could research Oxford PPE and not know its reputation.
For people who don't know, what is the reputation of PPE?
Tories, Rishi Sunak did PPE, Liz Truss did PPE. So, professional politicians, I don't want to be a politician.
You don't want to be a politician, but you went to Oxford to do politics, philosophy and economics. I hope you can see what I mean by the standard of people going to Oxford is clearly dropping. How do you end up in the course philosophy, politics and economics, not realise that that is the fast track to becoming an MP, and then say, well, I'd never wanted to be a politician? Either she is very good at being a politician quite early in life, or she's one of these students, and there are many students like this, where life is just a thing that happens to her, and she's just managing to get through life quite well because she is quite academic.
I mean, I just try and distance myself from the cults. I mean, one German lesson we went to a crypt and had candle lights and was underneath like a church.
Now, I'm not gonna lie, that sounds really, really cool. And I wouldn't be surprised if some research has gone into this, and just being in a quite alien place that you're not comfortable with might actually help improve you retain what you have learned there, because you associate it with that weird time that you remember. I don't know, but that sounds pretty cool. But it is quite funny to see all these people who went to Oxford who clearly didn't do any research into what Oxford's like, learning the hard way that no, you have gone to a high-end university, and because of that it turns out they actually do quite weird things.
Yeah, I think it is really strange. I know that other universities do have a lot of traditions that are equally strange, but I think I never would have expected to do the things that we've done here.
I mean, she goes into detail on some of those things, but I don't know if it's just the fact that I've had family members who went to Cambridge, and so I know that these prestigious universities have strange traditions and things like that, but it doesn't take that long to find these things out using Google. I don't know how, if you're going to Oxford, you don't research these things. I researched things at my university that I went to. I went to the open days and asked questions about what it's like there and things like that. I don't understand how you go to Oxford, go to an open day, and not find out they do weird things. I went to an Oxford open day. No, I went to a Cambridge open day, sorry. And yeah, they're all pretty open about these weird things that happen. Again, a lot of these people who are younger than me, they just don't seem inquisitive about the world around them. It's almost like we've made a generation where we just teach them life will happen to them, and they've just accepted that. And then when life isn't as good as they want it to be, they think that it is then the government or someone else's job to make it that way, rather than they work themselves to that better position.
It's quite bizarre that such a large portion of kind of civil society all studied, well, not even went to the same university, studied the same thing.
Yeah.
And now you're at the start of that cycle again. How do you feel about that?
I don't think it's a good thing. I think it's definitely going to change. Like, I think studying it is probably going to make it harder for me to go into something like that if I wanted to, which I don't really, but
I don't understand why this woman thinks that anything is going to change in the next few years. It feels like the actual reality of what Oxford's like now hasn't quite hit everyone. As I mentioned, yes, you have a few Bullingdon boy types doing PPE quite clearly, but they're not the type who are the academics within Oxford. They are not the type that get hired in the civil service. Those Bullingdon boy types, yes, they'll go straight to the Tory party, but then they're almost looked down upon and they have the whole political system against them. Look at Boris Johnson. Look at Liz Truss. To an extent, look at Rishi Sunak. If you go to Oxford to do PPE to then become a Tory politician, It's not the way we lead the country anymore. Okay, yes, they're in the position of power, but what can they really do? If you look at the COVID inquiry, apparently they just have to do what other people who did PP but not become Tories say, which is the civil service. And the Sue Gray report comes out, completely assassinates Boris Johnson and any future he had in politics, and eventually she herself becomes a Labour politician, and her son becomes a Labour MP candidate too. So no, it's not the case that people who do PPE are going to be overthrown by other people. No, what is happening is that the people who aren't part of the Bullingdon Club are overtaking in politics and power the Bullingdon Boys, the people like Jacob Rees-Mogg and Boris Johnson and David Cameron. The Bullingdon Boys essentially became servants of Blairites. And what a fantastic surprise. Tony Blair also went to Oxford. Now, he didn't do PPE, he did jurisprudence, which is basically just PPE, but specifically about law. But for some reason, it's only the Tory MPs and the people who were fake right-wingers who get all of the blame, although you also had Liz Truss, who was actually a right-winger, and got absolutely decimated within 40 days of becoming Prime Minister. So yeah, Oxford graduates who do PPE are still in charge of the country, it's just they're more behind the scenes rather than in Parliament these days.
I think it's because they created the degree for that reason. So like 100 years ago, you used to do classics if you wanted to like be famous, and then they were like, oh, let's do PPE instead.
I mean, yes, to a degree that is true. However, I do find it quite funny when you actually have a look at the list of notable people who did PPE. There's a whole range of ideologies in there. Because people like Christopher Hitchens did PPE at Oxford, and he ended up being a leftist, albeit a rather anti-woke one before woke was even a thing. You also have Will Self, who is one of the most annoying authors in Britain due to being insufferably left-wing. And then obviously you have a range of British politicians, from Harold Wilson to Ed Heath to Ed Miliband to William Hague. And there are plenty of foreign leaders who also did the course as well. In short, yes, it does seem like a replacement for the classics. Even Wikipedia mentions it in its history section, but I personally think it's actually quite a good thing to have specific courses for people who wish to go into politics. It's just quite clear that PPE doesn't result in you being either necessarily left-wing or right-wing. It just ends up with you being a good statesman. Although even that's questionable with the recent statesmanship of all our prime ministers.
So I think the idea of a professional politician is something I don't agree with. I think people having life experience is much better. So like Angela Rayner, I really like her. Obviously a lot of people don't, but she came into politics through unions, which I think's probably something we should have. We should have a mixture.
Yes, I'm one of those people that absolutely hates Angela Rayner, and it is borderline saying she shouldn't even be allowed to enter the Houses of Parliament. Because Angela Rayner is one of these people where people just like her because she has a working class accent. But when it comes to any sort of statesmanship, I can't imagine that she would be in any sort of good position when it comes to that. Oh, and I am deadly serious about that. You ask anyone who says they like Angela Rayner what they like about her, one of the first things they say will be something along the lines of, oh, I just like the way she says things. Which, as I say, effectively means she doesn't sound like a toff. In fact, she sounds working class and northern, and I like that because that is the opposite of my idea of a toff, and I just hate the toffs. That's it, that's all it comes down to.
You mentioned the union there. For people who don't know what the Oxford Union is, could you sum it up?
It is an interesting organisation, basically filled with, in my opinion, a bunch of nepo babies who want a future career as a Conservative cabinet minister.
I love the way he adds, in my opinion, before saying full of nepo babies, because if you just say in my opinion, then when facts show that you are wrong, you can just say, yeah, well, I just said it's my opinion, bro. But I really don't know how the organisation of the Oxford Union is put together, so he may be right for all I know, but I always hate this idea of, oh, there are people that know other people that are working in the Oxford Union, therefore it's full of nepo babies. Like, I don't care. As long as it runs well, who cares? And from what I can tell, the debates are run well. It's the debates themselves that aren't the issue. It's the people that are within them that say completely moronic things like this.
If based on the numbers, more Germans died than Brits in World War II, did that mean the British were wrong in World War II? Because they did. Many more Germans died than Brits. Based on the numbers, that means that Britain was wrong in World War II.
Britain wasn't bombing civilians.
It's this sort of thing that's my issue with Oxford at the moment. It seems to be absolutely full of people that know basically nothing, but because they're at Oxford, they think they know everything. And they just never seem to get embarrassed when they're wrong. And it's things like the Nepo babies thing. I have no idea what he would say is proof that there are Nepo babies in there. Because as I say, I don't know anyone who works for the Oxford Union. But from the results I see of the debates that they have, because that's effectively what the Oxford Union is, it's a debate society, they bring in guests from all over the world to have speeches. They had Steve Bannon in for once, for God's sake. And they've had people like Constantine Chris in, who is that? Oh, it's just some comedian. Like, they get all sorts of people in who are clearly activists and care about the issues to talk and debate these issues, and that's very good. But, oh, I don't know, the head secretary or whatever knew my lecturer through one of his friends, and therefore he clearly only got the job because of that. Well, if he's good at the job, who cares?
But other people would say it's an institution that upholds free speech, etc., etc. I don't know. Gracie is a member of it.
yeah, I know
That's interesting. Why did you join the union, and what do you get out of it?
I mean, I quite like debating and watching debating, so I guess I get that out of it.
Good, excellent. That's the exact reason that I watch the debates from the Oxford Union sometimes. Well done. Again, though, the guy's just kind of dismissive about the whole free speech argument for some reason. Which, again, is this whole intellectual incuriosity of Zoomers we're seeing right here. The girl clearly is interested and intellectually curious. The guy, though, let's just completely dismiss the Oxford Union because I don't like nepotism. I don't even know if nepotism is rife within the Oxford Union. I don't even think he knows. But I think he's trying to find a reason to excuse his intellectual incuriousness.
Obviously, going to Oxford stands you in a really good stead. Yeah. Going forward, well, you could become the BBC political editor, you could be the Prime Minister.
Yeah, well, let's hope she's not, eh? There's enough left-wingers in all these institutions, thank you very much.
You've stand you in a pretty good stead to do that. Did that come into it when you were applying?
Did you do this course because you think it would help your future life? Yes, that is why most people go to uni, because they're told that's the only way that they'll be successful in life.
I think like that nowadays is more just like if you go to a really good Russell Group university.
Well, the only reason for that is because they're really the only universities that have any sort of prestigious history of being a university. A lot of other non-Russell Group universities, and I didn't go to a Russell Group university, tend to be bums on seats university. Now, obviously, there are exceptions to non-Russell Group universities not being bums on seats university. That was the case for my particular university, but especially with a lot of ex-polytechnic universities, they effectively became universities to become cash cows, because being a polytechnic college wasn't as lucrative as becoming a university and getting all that sweet student debt money. And obviously that becomes even more lucrative when you let a load of foreign students in who have to pay slightly more and are willing to pay even more because they're probably still better educational institutions than what they have in their own countries. However, it has completely watered down what it means to have a degree these days, and therefore she is right. It depends what university you went to for quite a lot of employers. But as I say, once you get work experience anyway, barely anyone asks what university you went to. So it's good for getting your foot in the door, really, but that's only if you're academic. If you're not, you're better off going into plumbing, going into be an electrician, become an apprentice of some sort. It's just better all round. And who cares if you get looked down on for that? The people looking down on you will be left-wingers who'd hate you no matter what you do anyway.
I think now the sort of gap has narrowed between it like just being Oxford and Cambridge, that you can have that experience. Like even applying for like internships and stuff now, like I know someone who's like doing really well at like doing PPE at Manchester has just as good a chance as me.
I don't necessarily think that's true. Going to a Russell Group would probably mean that you have a better chance than someone going to a non-Russell Group, and certainly better than a Polytechnic, but better than Oxford or Cambridge. No, I don't think we're ever going to get to that point because they are just that prestigious, and to be honest with you, they still probably deserve it.
Because any gain you might have is kind of counteracted by the fact that they can't just take people from Oxford and Cambridge, like it's not the 1980s anymore.
Yes, but that problem's been completely thwarted by the fact that Oxford and Cambridge are simply throwing away UCAS forms from people who come from private schools because they've been given stupid targets. So going to Oxford, again, doesn't just mean you're part of the Bullingdon Boys Club. Again, those people are looked down on anyway. So again, I'm going to push back on this because I've seen absolutely no evidence that going to Manchester gives you as good a chance as someone going to Oxford, given how much more work you need to do to get your degree at Oxford.
I think that I always knew I wanted to further my academics, and I think that nowadays there are so many other ways of doing that, a kind of degree apprenticeships if you still want to get a degree out of it.
Yeah, but not many people really know that that exists, and once again, there's a whole stigma of if you didn't go to university, then you don't really have a degree. There's a lot of people who practically think that.
But like, I think that nowadays there are also kind of more courses that you can do. So like my brother, for example, he does football coaching and performance.
Why? Why would you need to go to university for that? Again, this is the sort of thing that you'd be much better off doing an apprenticeship under a football coach or something like that. Obviously, the issue is that supply is no way going to keep up with demand for that. And well, that's just life. You have to pick something else then. But I don't think universities should be taking your money to do something that is just clearly not an academic study. The point of academics and research is that you go into a science or a philosophy or whatever, you do all the reading around the subject to try and understand it. That's the undergraduate degree. And then when you go into a postgrad, you understand it and then you can specialise and go into research from there. What can you possibly research within the university institution that wouldn't just be much better doing it the practical way within a football team or something like that? Especially where you can get all the money to do the research from the clubs. And these people think it's great. Oh, look, you can get a degree in these completely useless subjects. And these aren't even the worst examples of it. I mean, we have literal academics of black studies who effectively just say that their courses are grifts. I mean, this is Kahindi Andrews explaining how he got his own course in Birmingham University.
It was because they started charging students fees in 2017. We could get an unlimited amount of students. And I literally went to uni and said, look, we're the only place in the country that could do this. We could make money. And that's how we got black studies, right? Interest convergence. None of the people who did that were allies, as I later found out.
Yeah, in short, a lot of these Mickey Mouse degrees, an awful lot of the professors are under the impression that they are only doing that to grift. I can make the university money and you will pay me for running these courses that are completely useless because we effectively have an unlimited amount of people we need to educate. And this is why a lot of people think that universities are a joke, because they are. A lot of the people running these courses will openly say they are, and then at the same time say they deserve more money. These institutions are supposed to be elite, and the whole reason that it's not elite anymore is because every single college has turned into a university to get these student loans. The incentives are all there. I don't blame them for doing this yet again, but nothing's been done to try and curb it, and honestly, probably the biggest reason for that is because they are just cash cows. The incentive is there to keep it that way because it makes money, although in the future, given that basically no one's going to be able to actually pay off their student debt, it's going to have to collapse at some point, and the sooner it does, the better.
And so it's a very niche degree, but it's something that he loves, and in that sense, I do think uni's worth it. If you find a subject that you really love, then, and you want to spend the time learning more about it, then uni's definitely worth it.
I would say that's true for genuinely, traditionally academic subjects. However, if it is something that is completely new, you're probably better off just doing your own private work and research on it, if you have the time and money to do that, obviously. Because a great example of this is James Hutton, who, to be fair, did go to university, but never to actually study geology, which is what he is known for. His studies were mainly in medicine and chemistry, but when he was working as a geologist and researcher, he never held a position within the University of Edinburgh. Instead, he was communicating all his scientific findings through the Royal Society. And granted, this was a few hundred years ago, but the people who were truly interested in revolutionising discoveries and things like that, they're not really working at universities. They're working for places like SpaceX or Tesla or in engineering, places where you can actually innovate. So again, this isn't a call to not go to university. It's just letting you know that going to university doesn't mean that you're going to make some huge scientific discovery, though there's every chance you could. You're much more likely to do it outside of these institutions where clearly they care about tradition to some degree, and being a bit of a maverick is frowned upon.
But if you want to go into business, if you want to go and, be an electrician, obviously university isn't the right place to do that, maybe.
It's interesting how wanting to be a businessman or an electrician are seen as places where you don't really need to go to uni for, but for some reason being a sports scientist is. When the reality of the situation is that pretty much for none of those things you need a degree, but you still have business studies degrees. I knew someone who did management, and I still can't get my head around what doing a management degree actually entails. But he did a dissertation, so he must have done something. But it is true, there are plenty of university courses that are just pointless, but this guy doesn't want to say he thinks sports science is pointless, I'd guess, because he'd be insulting his brother, but I have no qualms with insulting people who did pointless degrees at university. I know people that did American studies, and the main reason they said they did that was because they got to do a year in America. I know people that did physiotherapy at university. Barely any personal trainer or physiotherapist I know did that at university. So all these pointless degrees, and as Candy Andrews has already mentioned, it's all just to make money. It's all to be a cash cow. But don't worry, again, your debt's not that bad. Your debt is very student-sided. It gets written off after 25 or 30 years, depending on your plan. And by the time you do start paying it off, you're making decent money. So the student debt part really isn't a worry. I don't know why British kids go on about it so much, especially given that it was them using their own handwriting to sign the contract.
I think in terms of having a degree, and in terms of how people are so overqualified for jobs nowadays, it is almost worth it because you kind of have to get on that bandwagon.
That depends entirely on the job. Again, I'm in a completely different sector to where I started off, but I still managed to get an internship without the degree being particularly relevant. And when it came to software development grad schemes, having a degree didn't get me in automatically necessarily. Doing a year internship in the actual sector did help an awful lot more. Depending what type of person you are, in a lot of cases, I think just going into work is a better choice than going to university. However, again, if you're academic, there's no reason not to.
Yeah, but in terms of like the teaching and the stuff here, I wouldn't say like here's like a radically better experience than any other university.
How could you possibly know that if you're in your first year and you've only ever been to Oxford? Look, Oxford isn't just seen as this prestigious place by blind luck. It's a prestigious place because the teaching quality is better than most other universities, if not all of them. I mean, this truly is a type of privilege, blindness. She can't see that she is in one of the most prestigious places in the world, and there's a reason so many prominent people went to Oxford. In her mind, it's just, no, this is just like any other type of uni. No, it's remarkably good.
I think too many people go to university and take on debt that they don't need to. I think not enough people do things like degree apprenticeships.
Yep, totally agree. Too many people do go to university. But what I do find quite annoying is that the first alternative anyone ever comes up with is just doing a degree by other means. That's not going to help with the oversaturation of degrees in the market.
But that's because our government pushed too many people into going to university and was like, yeah, it'll be great, have a great time.
I swear to God, if she ends up blaming that on the Tories, I think I'm going to scream.
But we actually need more people with vocational skills. People who are doing medicine here, they're going to make like £12 an hour. Plumbers, they make so much money because we don't have enough plumbers.
I could go into the irony of her saying, oh, I would have been much better off going in to do plumbing as an apprentice rather than going in and doing PP at Oxford, but the reality of the situation is that a lot of people will say this because they think it's cool, but the main reason people go to university is for the prestige of it. Yes, I went to university. Yes, I got my degree. You know, it's not got to the point where it's embarrassing to go to uni yet, but I think it will be one day. But the reality of the situation is that this girl, as much as she is saying that, oh, you'll make more money than me as a plumber, she will still look down on people who do plumbing, which is why a lot of people are probably going to be embarrassed to go into it. But, you know, plumbers are lifesavers. I relied on plumbers to get my house to stop leaking and to get my boiler fixed again. And it's not as simple as they just make more money than you. Again, oh, they're doing medicine. As I said at the beginning, they'll make £12 an hour. Again, that's only in the junior doctor stage. By the time a plumber and a doctor are at the same age and are about 40, the doctor's going to be making 10 times the amount that the plumber will be making. Which is why you're still seeing so many people do medicine rather than go into plumbing.
But yeah, I think it's worth it in terms of having a degree, but it also depends like what class of degree you get, right?
Well, I got a 2-2 and I would still probably say it was worth it, but that's mainly because I love geology so much. And I mean, I was 0.5% off a 2-1 and I'm still not letting that go almost 7 years later. But for a lot of people who are at uni and they say, yeah, I think it's worth it, they don't really know what the time after's like. And it's a problem I had. I didn't know what I was going to do after uni, so I ended up working at a shop for 2 years with also part of that time, I was working in a part-time internship. I was working 60 hours a week. Like, going to university I don't think helped all that much. I think it helped me develop my intellectual curiosity for other things because I felt like I got a decent education in natural resources, the environment, geology, whatever. And it really did feed into my thirst for knowledge, hence I've got a decent bookshelf now. But again, none of this is actually to do with my job. I could have got the job I have now without going to uni, I reckon. But I think it would have been a harder task. And hey, I know people who are working for big banks who are software developers, and they never went to university. They just self-taught programming. So even with things you think you might need a degree for, you don't actually need one. And again, this is the problem with, I mean, she's blaming the government, but it's all of society, really. Everyone's parents want their kids to go to university. Every school wants their kids to go to university because it helps with the league tables. Every part of the world is just pushing young people to go to university, and honestly, a lot feel like a failure if they can't get in. When the reality is that they're simply not academic people. They should be doing work instead, and they'd probably be very good workers.
Because if you don't get 2-1 or above, then no one's going to care that I went to Oxford if I flunk out or fail. So,
no, according to this woman, I failed. But even at that point, I don't think I've ever been checked if I actually had a degree. So you just say you went to the university you went to on your degree, you say what you did, and you can literally just lie. If you say you've got a 2-1, 9 times out of 10 that won't be checked. That was actually the advice my mum gave to my brother who, sorry, but he got a 3rd. I hope he never hears this. But some advice my mother gave to him was just, hey, just say you got a 2-1. Hopefully they won't check. And, you know, more than 10 years later, he's a chartered accountant making pretty good money. And he'd probably be slightly further ahead if he did better at university. But at the end of the day, yeah, as soon as you're on the job ladder, university doesn't mean that much. And I think more people need to realise that, but unfortunately, you tell kids this, their parents will go, don't listen to that, they're a conspiracy nut, go to uni, because I want you to have that prestige.
I mean, personally, I think it's worth it, I guess, just because I enjoy, the academic aspect of my degree, and I guess, here, you really get that.
Yeah, again, pretty much my advice, and to be honest, this is the advice most people would give anyway. Again, extreme Britain. It's literally just people that are giving normal opinions.
I mean, money-wise, obviously, I think going to uni is something that is a massive financial commitment, and I feel like nowadays people are thinking a lot more about that.
Again, even when it comes to financial contributions, just take a look at the worst plan that we can find, which is Plan 5. Effectively, it works as a graduate tax. It's not a graduate tax, but people describe it as a graduate tax. I don't like that because then they say, oh, lower taxes for students. Well, it's not a tax. It is a loan that you signed up for. You only start paying it back from 25,000 and a penny, and from there you are paying 9% extra than if you didn't go to uni at all. Now, yes, that is a fair amount. It's actually a lot more than what I'm paying back on Plan 2, because there is no way I am paying 9% extra on my income compared to non-uni goers, and it's a pretty flat 9% extra than someone who didn't go to uni. So in other words, 9% of anything you earn over 25,000 goes straight to repaying student loans, which, I'll be honest with you, isn't an awful lot. That's about £900 a year if you're on £35,000. And that's actually not too much more than what I was paying back on Plan 2. And with interest rates going on top of it, essentially the only way you're paying off student loans is by paying it all in one go when you can actually afford it, because interest rates are just going to make that rise and rise and rise. So you think, oh, that's a debt I've got forever. Well, no, after 40 years, it's just written off anyway. And that was apparently 30 years before 2023. It wasn't. It was 25 when I signed it, and that's still Plan 2. So yeah, don't get me wrong, it looks like student loans have got slightly worse, but again, it gets written off after some time anyway. As it turns out, all that happens is you'll have slightly less income over your lifetime, but if you have a degree, you should be getting a better job anyway in theory, and if you're not, then maybe we should change the way that society views degrees in university, because at the moment it seems like a lot of people think it's the only way to get anywhere in life, and it's just not. But anyway, point being made, this is the most student-sided debts that I think you could come up with. You don't need to pay it back because it's written off after 40 years, and they're only going to make you pay it back when you can actually reasonably afford it. So all this whinging about a financial commitment, it's really not that much. 9% over 25,000, it's not that bad. I know that because I'm pretty much paying that. And in fact, that's not even mentioning that this is for people in England only. People in Wales have a much discounted student loan payment. They basically don't have to pay anything. In fact, I think it's a third of what students from England have to pay, and I meant Scotland here. Scotland are the ones that don't have to pay anything. And while we were in the EU, I don't know if this is still true, but they were also offering places to EU students for completely free. Effectively, if you are born Anglo, you are in the worst position to be born in when it comes to living in the UK.
When they make their decision, I mean, I definitely personally also thought about doing a degree apprenticeship because I was a bit unsure about, the money aspect, because it is a big investment and, you're not necessarily going to get the rewards out of it.
I honestly think saying, oh, but student loans is just a meme at this point. I don't take it seriously. It's, as I say, the most student-sided debt I could come up with. You don't have to pay it back, and all it does is take slightly more out of your income. 9% is only going to become an awful lot when you're earning over £100,000, and by that point I think we can say that you're reasonably comfortable with your income. So yeah, I simply just don't believe she considered a apprenticeship degree based on the student loans alone. I just don't believe that would be the case. You are literally given free money to go to university.
People who come to Oxford or any university can take on quite a lot of debt to come here, or take on a massive kind of financial burden to come here. Do you think it's worth it?
I'm not fully sure.
I don't know what position he'd be in to actually say this. He's a foreign student. It's a completely different way it works. As far as I'm aware, foreign students do pay more in terms of their student loans, and therefore it's a completely different question for him. But I suppose since it's extreme Britain, we have to ask the foreigners what they think as well.
I didn't have to think about it that way, because the only reason why I'm here is because I'm on a scholarship, and so I didn't have to think about the debt.
Oh, even better, he's a foreign student on a scholarship. I assume he's earned the scholarship perfectly legitimately, so fair dues. It's I suppose it could actually be an interesting answer. Is it worth going to university on a scholarship? I don't know why you wouldn't say yes. It's actually funny because I was technically on a scholarship from the university I went to because I overperformed in my exams to get into the university. And so I'd also say, yeah, it was definitely worth it to go to university for an extra £1,000 a term that the university just gave to me, probably because I was overpaying them in student loans.
So I can't really answer that question, but I don't know, really.
I think it's fine to answer this question, I'm on a scholarship programme, therefore it's obviously good. But I suppose if he's saying, oh, I don't know what it's like to have student loans, so I can't give a good answer to that, then fair enough.
So you didn't have the scholarship. Yeah. Do you think that's something you'd be prepared to take on?
I don't think so. Given my degree, even if I went into a job, I don't think I would be able to pay it off quickly enough. So.
Again, I don't know how this guy's student loans would work, but again, under the British system, specifically the English one, because that is the worst, it's really not that bad, and students have to stop pretending like it's the biggest injustice known to man when they signed a contract. And I swear to God, if they said, oh, I was 18, I didn't know what I was signing up for, then as far as I'm concerned, we need to raise voting to 25 then.
Don't think I would be considering an education if it wasn't financially viable, and I wouldn't want to take on £100,000 of debt.
£100,000 of debt? Where do you come from? I've never heard of any country in the world having £100,000 of student debt. So yeah, I can understand why you wouldn't want a debt of £100,000 if you went to uni. That makes sense. Although if it's written off after a certain amount of time, I don't know why you wouldn't take it.
Something. No, that's not right. I think 50,000 would be the right amount, I guess, with student maintenance loans as well. But yeah.
Funnily enough, that's what I ended up on, with a 6% interest. I am not expecting to pay that off ever unless I manage to become a multi-millionaire. And again, I'm only paying slightly less than Plan 5 students. The only difference between me and Plan 5 students when it comes to paying off the debt is that I'm paying 9% of anything I'm earning that is over £27,500 a year. The new students are doing it after £25,000, which would mean generally they're paying slightly more than me, but again, at the wage I'm at currently, I think I'd be paying an extra £20 a month on student loan if I started uni today. So it's something I don't get why there's such an uproar about.
I feel like most of the degrees here, unless you're interested in staying in academia, really aren't that useful in terms of your long-term career prospects.
Yep, true, that is absolutely true. The amount of people that have clearly gone to uni just because they feel like it's the next move that they have to make and ended up in jobs they easily could have got without a degree is absolutely insane. I think my best example of this is I know a lot of people that did American studies at my university, and they all ended up in pretty much dead-end admin roles that... When I ended up working in a shop, pretty much everyone I knew who got fed up of working in a shop went into similar admin roles without a degree. And as mentioned before, a lot of these lecturers will just say, yeah, we're just getting you in here to learn absolutely nothing for your money, or your debt, I should say. So, yeah, think carefully about your future when you're 18. And if anyone says, oh, 18 is too young to make a decision for the rest of your life like that, again, let's raise voting to 25 then.
I mean, there's some particular degrees like engineering, which are really tailored towards like employment opportunities straight after you've graduated, and how like lots of engineering students just end up, you know, working for like the arms industry, selling weapons to governments with poor human rights records.
So it went from, oh, people go to university and get degrees that don't get them good jobs, to, oh, engineers end up just working for arms industries. I'd love to know what this guy's studying at Oxford, because if I were to guess, it would be somewhere in the philosophy department. Because I've met plenty of people who went to Oxford to go to the philosophy department, and they come out with just silly things like this again. I mean, as I say, Alex O'Connor, who I referenced before, they just come out with the most lame intellectual arguments that you can ever come up with. Literally, most of these people are just over-intellectualized hippies, and it's part of the reason that Oxford University is losing some of its prestige.
But when it comes to like the humanities, like history, we both do history.
When it comes to history, you seem to get both completely opposite sides of the political spectrum there. So I wouldn't say I'm particularly surprised that it turned out to be history. I know people that did history and came out very based, and people who did history and came out very cringe.
In terms of like training you up with like human capital and making you more employable, I'm really not sure they do make you more employable. I think really what degrees from universities like Oxford do is give you sort of that rubber stamp approval on your CV to tell corporations that you are like one of them.
So this is probably part of the reason that a lot of people who come out of Oxford don't have great skills when it comes to work. And the thing is that it's not the university's job to give you skills like that. That's what you go into the workforce for. And a problem with Oxford and Cambridge is that they disincentivise you from actually getting part-time jobs while you're at uni so that you can fully focus on studying. The whole point of going to these prestigious universities, such as Oxbridge, is so that you can become a full-time academic and hopefully end up doing research for the university. And that's fine, but you got to realise when you go to Oxford, you're not going to have great life skills like that. That is not the point of them. And honestly, it was quite an annoying thing I found when I went to uni. In second year, there were entire modules that were basically just how to write a CV and how to do well in a job interview. They were literally training me for job interviews and CVs, and that's not why I went to university. I didn't pay attention to any of those lectures, and I didn't put much effort into writing my CV or preparing for my mock job interview, because I didn't see how it furthered my studies. I could see how it was going to be helpful in the future when I eventually got a job, but the fact of the matter is that my parents had already gone through that sort of thing. I had my first CV written when I was 16. I then found every excuse under the book in summer to not get jobs, don't get me wrong, but I already had some basic skills there, and to be honest with you, what ended up happening here anyway is that a few people who worked, who were on the course as well, their parents were in HR or knew how to write CVs, and so what everyone essentially did was write CVs, and these people's parents, if they were obviously good at looking through CVs, would just do it for them. They'd do it for the entire class because it's their friends and they want to be helpful. And so everyone just sent it to them, added the corrections in, and then sent it in, and pretty much everyone got a first, so it was pointless in that sense anyway. And the thing is as well is that there were plenty of people who were on my course and went to work and still didn't even have good work skills then, because again, that is not the point of a university. It's not there to prepare you for a career. It is there to teach you and help you understand how to read scientific papers, how to write dissertations, how to write research, how to effectively communicate intelligent information. That's what university is there for. So don't go to one and expect it to just be a glorified career services charity.
You'll work well in a corporate environment, even if necessarily you don't actually have the skills to work in a corporate environment, which is why so many people in this university go to like consultancy and finance in London. I mean, really, how much skill is there in these jobs? I don't know.
Quite a lot of work, actually. I don't know where the idea that being in finance and being in business is low skilled come from, but typically if you're high up in a business, it's because you have a lot of experience in those fields. And when it comes to finance, yeah, having a degree or at least qualifications is a pretty big must there. They even have further qualifications you need to be if you want to, say, be a chartered accountant or a business finance consultant. You need qualifications for that, so clearly it's quite well skilled. And actually, doing a finance degree or doing even a chemistry degree is actually seen as a really good boon, because you need to be precise in both of those subjects, and that's what they love about it. They need high-skilled, highly conscientious people in those jobs, and getting a degree in that would be helpful. It's not like going to university is pointless for everyone. It's a really good step up in certain industries, but I know people, and John, I'm sure you're going to be in the chat, who are in these industries anyway and never went to university. They got there via different means, and that's fine as well.
I think more it's just about talking in the right way and using the right social codes, which isn't really a skill, it's just something you learn.
It's not really a skill, it's just something you learn. It has to be one of the most Oxford sentences I think I've heard in this entire video. What is a skill if it is not just something you learn? Because, I mean, I suppose I can understand if you just do rote learning, that's not exactly a skill, that's just basic memory recall. But having the skill to communicate within finance, I think, John, again, if you're going to be in the comments, please let me know. I'd assume that that is a pretty important skill and not just something that you can just learn. It's something that you actually have to have a talent in as well. Because communicating all the points I want to make on YouTube, that's something that I have learned over time, but I think it'd be stupid to say it's not a skill. But this guy's clearly gone to Oxford, really doesn't want to get the degree just to go into some sort of corporation, and is hoping that, or the people who go into these corporations are actually low skilled, I want to do something better. Yeah, that's fine, but let's not pretend that people in business and finance are not skilled people.
For me, I'd say that it's been worth it because I've so enjoyed my course.
Pretty much everyone in their final year at uni will absolutely say, yes, go to uni, it is great. Even I say it. But you really need the caveat of, it's only worth it if you're going to do something useful with that academic paper. Otherwise, it is essentially just a waste of 3 years. And if you just want to waste 3 years getting drunk and having a good time, yeah, that's great. Just expect to pay 9% of your paycheck for the rest of your life and accept the consequences of wasting those 3 years. You're not going to be able to buy a house within 2 years after that. But really, if that is the route you want to go down, get an apprenticeship, get an entry-level job, and just work from there. Work your way up from there. It will be much quicker than going to university. It's entirely dependent on the type of person you are.
I think that the question of employment and what the next step might be for me and people my age at Oxford, final years, is a question that we have to talk about a lot. A lot of people have to compromise on what their ambitions were at the start of the course. They're not sure what they'll be able to get. They might have to sell their soul to the sort of corporate monster.
These people think we live in Cyberpunk 2077. Having a corporate job, which I have worked, by the way, it's not all that bad. It's not a sell your soul type thing. I've worked with corporations for about 2 years, close to 3, and I didn't like it. So I got the skills to actually move up, and now I work for a much smaller company that I much prefer, and everyone in that job prefers it. But the issue with corporations isn't the fact you're working for them. Corporations are just following incentives, and they are just made up of other people just like you. And a lot of people would like to think that they're better than that, but I'm afraid to say a lot of people aren't. A lot of people would just like to be a cog in that big machine to then have a good life outside of it. And that's absolutely fine. You know, it's not selling your soul. I don't understand where this idea that all corporations are evil come from. But then I don't even know what your alternative would be. Why did you go to Oxford then?
But, you know, like, I think it's the question of how valuable the experience is on a personal level.
See, they can't even come up with a decent alternative. That's what they think their choice is. Either sell your soul to a corporation, or, well, I don't know, let me just move on to talking about how much I loved uni. And the thing is, a lot of people I know who went to Oxford ended up in the civil service anyway. And I don't understand why that would not be seen as selling your soul, but working for a corporation would be, because they're essentially the same thing. The civil service is just the corporation of the government.
This is how profitable it might be later down the line, and it's really hard to say for now.
Yes, I agree. I think one of the worst things you can do is come out of uni and not have a plan. That is one thing I would say to people. Just have a plan. Just find a summer internship and do it. I didn't, and I ended up being somewhat unhappy for 2 years, working a job that was clearly under my skills. But also, it's never then too late to either get skills or get the entry-level job that you want. Okay, you might be older than other people, but it doesn't matter. You know, you will develop your skills from there. You will go on to have a career. It doesn't matter how late you start. Typically, you are quite well compensated for the good choices you make and the work you put in.
Will you be selling your soul to the corporate monster?
I'll let you know in a year's time. I don't know yet. I don't know.
She will, because she doesn't know what other choice she has. She thinks that's the only thing she can do. She can either go and join a faceless corporation or join the faceless civil service. They're her only two choices that she knows. That's why it's the only one that was brought up. Anyway, that's the end of Extreme Britain, talking to the smartest people in Britain about going to uni. I'm not convinced too many of these people were remarkably smart. I would classify most of these people as midwits, but that's exactly the type of person that they're incentivising to go to university, so what do you expect? Anyway, I can't wait to see what the topic next week is, but for now, that is everything I had for you for today. So once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.